South Africans want water, electricity, sanitation, and refuse removal. Our people want protection against crime and gangsters. People want local government to deliver services that they need and support the local businesses that provide jobs and livelihoods. This is what South Africans want. We are the African National Congress, and we've been serving the people of this country for the past 27 years. Vote ANC, Amandla! Amandla!
Good evening, I'm Penny Libiani, and welcome to another edition of ANC News. Joining me tonight is Mamoloko Kubai, who is the Minister of Human Settlement. Good evening, Minister, and thank you for joining me.
Good evening, Penny, and good evening to the viewers.
Great stuff. You have been traveling across the country, with your portfolio from rural communities and urban areas. What are the immediate priorities for human settlement when it comes to accelerating delivery of services?
Yeah, it has been quite exciting and also eye-opening since the appointment into human settlements. Moving across the province, you'd realize that each province is unique, it's different in terms of its priority. If you look at Gauteng, for example, you'd find that the priorities here to resolve the issues of urban growth, where many people are moving into Gauteng. So you'd find them clustering around informal settlements, but also those who have grown up in townships that are sitting within the yards of their families that are looking for accommodation or houses outside or land. And then you'd find when you go to your KZN, it's rural parts of KZN that mainly have been left where we still have, like, we had to deal with issues of mud houses that we're converting now, building in terms of building houses for those. So the priority right now is to be able to say to South Africans, one, resolving the issue of our beneficiary list for me, because that has become a major headache. Secondly, fast-tracking the issue of issuing of title deeds, because it gives dignity to the people and prioritizes them, and being able to give them back in terms of those who have not been able to own, that we can go into detail later. Then again is to be able to say, because constitutionally it's a mandate for us to provide shelter to those who are most vulnerable. So we've got to fulfill that responsibility in terms of our obligation, but again, to be able to try and redress the past in terms of spatial development, because previously human settlements or housing were built away from opportunities, away from jobs, away from recreational facilities, and that's why we have moved from being a department of housing but to a human settlement, because it speaks to a whole lot of things that when we build communities, we must build them closer to opportunities with recreational facilities, for example, amenities such as schools, hospitals, and all that. So the priority is to be able to assist government in closing the apartheid special landscape, which has been really a disservice to majority of the black people.
So you got to travel to the Free State a few days ago to sort out some of the challenges with the local municipalities there. So how are you going to ensure effective service delivery? And also the question is, does this mean that now you're going to have to be traveling directly to these communities to address this?
Look, traveling to Free State was the instruction of the president. He went to Free State on a campaign. When he was there a few weeks ago, you'd remember when he was campaigning there, and there were quite a number of issues that were raised to him by communities around human settlement. He was not able to deal with them in detail. So that's where he committed that I would be there before the elections to deal with the issues. So we were there to deal with those issues as instructed. And this talks to a different way of governing, where President says, we have learned from the past as this ANC government. And you'd remember when he launched the manifesto, that was his major message, to say We have learned from our mistakes. We are doing and we are governing differently. And that's part of what we are showcasing, and we are following in his footsteps to change. I don't have to be everywhere in terms of the country. We have all 9 MECs. Human settlement is a concurrent function, which provinces have a responsibility. What we do as national, we set the policy, we set the directive, we sign the business plans annually for the provinces, and provinces have to implement those. So the MECs have the responsibility to be able to oversee what is development in terms of human settlements in those provinces, working together with the municipalities. Some of municipalities have developer status, some don't. But what we are learning in other areas is almost like intervention approach, where, for example, in Thabo Mofutsanyan, we needed to go in and intervene. And this will talk to even some of the broader issues that we have to deal with in giving confidence back to people in Free State in that we are going to deal with their issues around human settlements that they raised with the president.
Were you able to resolve the issues that you were dealing with in the Free State?
Yes, we are able to. We have been able to. It's a long term, obviously. What we were able to do is to identify where the problem is. One is because of the blocked, what we call blocked projects. We had 2 programs that were run in Free State, specifically in those areas. One is around what we call Vuzenzele type, where we give material to people and then they build for themselves. So what had happened in the process is that some were given material, some were not given the material to be able to build. But when they go to the system, including those who in the system will say they've registered and they have benefited, only to find that the system says you have received a house, but when we go physically, there is no house. And this is because the project has not been finished. So we were able to identify that problem. Secondly, what we are doing now this week, the team is identifying all the unfinished projects in Free State. We are going to start looking at them and prioritizing them to intervene and resolving them so that we can start rebuilding for the communities. The other issue is that we are opening the system in Free State, where we are going to call people to come in and verify those who are regarded as having benefited in the system and haven't not, so that we can be able to reallocate them to projects. So the work has started already this week.
All right, so we'll get into that a little bit later. I just want us to talk about issues of informal settlements in urbanized areas. How is that being addressed and linked to the manifesto?
Informal settlements, we have a program at national and funding allocated for it, where we talk about formalizing. Firstly, it has to be formalized. The settlement has to be formalized so that we can provide services such as bulk infrastructure. In metros, we provide what we call urban grant, where we give it to the metros. They are able to put the bulk infrastructure, such as water, electricity, and sanitation. Out of those, then we are able to build the RDPs, what we call BNG. They're breaking new grounds. They are commonly known as RDPs. Now, the challenge more is that with the informal settlements, for example, it's a moving target. Today I was in Zandspruit. Zandspruit, you know, it's one of the informal settlements that has been since 1993 and which we have to take responsibility and fix. Because we can't have such a situation. But when you go into deeper, there's been areas where there's been built. So people who have built houses, others moved to Cosmos City, as you'd know. But because the informal settlement grows, it's not ending. Where families, I would have my children, they grow, then they start having their own informal settlement or their own shack, what they call other places, they call them shanties, so they call different things in different provinces. So that's what you see in terms of movement of that. So part of what we have to do now, and which is something that we are resolving, is that people have chased informal settlements because they had lost faith that we will build. So they believe that if they put themselves, eventually we allow them to stay, and then we put services. Whereas we need to turn the tide and start building so that people can have confidence that we are seeing development happening, and therefore will be allocated houses. So that's part of the issue. But another issue that we have now identified as government is that not everybody is looking for an RDP house. Yes. Some people are looking for land and they want to build for themselves. I was in Mlazi recently doing door-to-door there, and some of the community members were saying to me, Minister, you know, you guys have taught us to do things for ourselves. We just need land. Put land, service the stands, put water, electricity, and sanitation. Leave us with the land. We will build for ourselves. And this is evident as well. If you go Kanyamazan in Mpumalang, you'd find where we've put RDPs. Actually, I was shocked when MEC Mashilo told me
they're not there anymore.
They're no longer there, RDPs. It's big houses. This is an example that shows that we've got to move. Part of what we would have later talk about as policy in ANC is to say, do we have to make it compulsory? Because even the manifesto talks about us providing a multiple approach in terms of services. Service lands, giving title deeds, but also those who are in the middle class, because previously we had not catered for them. We provided for RDPs and then other categories, people who can afford for their bonds. Now you had missing middle in terms of human settlements or housing, and that we are now catering for as government in providing subsidies to those. So the overall package needs for people to understand, and what I'm learning as I go across the provinces is that many people don't know that we offer a lot. We are known for RDPs only, and that's the message as well, another priority of communicating more, being able to do even in different languages where we can break down what we offer as government and what are the limitations, but also to be able to say to people, those who need stands, don't go and take an RDP when you don't need it. Okay. Take a stance, we'll be able to give you, and many provinces have moved towards that.
Okay, so let's talk about one of the biggest challenges is the delays. There's a feeling that, you know, it's taken so long. What sort of plans are there to accelerate some of these programs?
Look, one of the things that delays, for example, a formalization of an informal settlement. When I got to the department, I learned that to formalize an informal settlement takes 10 years. So part of what we are doing now is to review the process. Where are the bottlenecks? What takes so long? We're reviewing two things: regulatory areas, where it takes, the regulation says to us, you must do this by these dates. So we're reviewing that, but we'll have to talk to our sister departments because, for example, for us to formalize an informal settlement, you need the Department of Environment for EIAs as well in the environment. You need geologists to tell you whether the environment you can build, it's habitable, but also the planning units in the municipalities. Part of the conversation we've been having with municipalities as we grow across the country is to say, please change your requirements of formalization of informal settlements, because some of these requirements needs resources which municipalities don't have, especially your district municipalities and local municipalities. As we implement the DDM model, one of the things that we are packaging as human settlements is to showcase that if we can reduce the time it takes to formalize an informal settlement, delivery of human settlements will be faster. And that conversation has started, and we're hoping that the new councils, as they come, they will amend their bylaws and they will amend their policies to assist us.
Okay, so another one that's also been very emotional for a lot of people, it's part of your job, is giving title deeds. You find people who are like old people who haven't had houses for a long time, military veterans, for example. How have you been dealing with that?
Look, let's start with the military veterans. Military veterans, one is that we provide them with houses. We wait for, and I think I need to explain it properly. We get a list from the Department of Defense and Military Veterans of verified military veterans across. And that is provided to us. And as we build, we allocate a percentage of them to be able to get those houses. So we go on the list. I've been monitoring that since I arrived. My predecessor, Lindiwe Sisulu, has been doing that as well in terms of ensuring that we implement and take care of our military veterans. Many of them are saying we can improve. We've been giving them, and we think we'll fast track that as well, giving them the houses. And part of what we are doing is that the square meters of military veterans is higher than normal BNGs or RDPs, and the specs are better than what we're giving, obviously because the requirements is subsidized as well, provided for by the department. So we have been giving, quite a number of them have been appreciating. I met one, for example, in Mpumalang who got the house in 2015. He has extended the house, he's working now. After we gave the RDP, he's working. He was able to extend the house. He was able, it's looking beautiful actually. It doesn't look like an RDP anymore. And that's one of the good stories, that when you meet people and showcase that we are seeing this, we are having a shelter of a roof over our heads that is helping. Then we were in KZN, where it was a very touching ceremony where we were handing over title deeds in Chatsworth, Indian community, above 80 years. Somebody is receiving a title deed and saying, I've never owned a property for the better part of my life. That's where they were moved by apartheid into those flats. So we eventually gave them ownership of those. And we are working in terms of ensuring that they are habitable. They raised some issues with me in terms of maintenance for us to support them. And we are looking into, we actually started to implement that together with MECCB. So when they they started singing, as we were there and dancing. I remember one of the ladies had to come, the daughter, to say the lady has a bit of asthma. But she was like dancing and refusing to sit down and say, you don't know what this means to me. I'm an owner today. And I've never since ever in my life owned a property. So it's those. Again, we give to disabled communities, people living with disabilities. We went, giving them the houses. Similarly, you find people expressing themselves differently. And I think that's the fulfillment part of what I do. When you go in either as MEC or minister and you are handing over this title deeds, you are handing over these houses, and people say, this has changed my life. And that's where you see the impact of government's intervention in people's lives.
Okay, I know another one, is a challenge around children who are orphaned in the country, who find themselves with no homes or who had caregivers looking after them, and women as well who are, vulnerable situations. How do you deal with that?
Look, that, I must say, this week was one of the week I had to deal with quite a lot of that, where in Mpumalanga, I was in Mpumalanga and we were doing door-to-door. What we are finding with children, and which is heartbreaking, and maybe my appeal to communities to really think deep about these families, where you find we have allocated these children a house, or their parents had an RDP. They pass away. A family member goes and sells this house and literally sending the children to the streets who are orphans, young children below 18, 19, because they believe them to be young. And that's part of the problem, where these children are vulnerable. And my appeal to communities is because as government, we might not be in those communities. So we're relying on CTWs, we are relying on councillors, but broadly, your churches, your social activists in these communities to really flag this and protect these children, because it's becoming a common thing. Some actually go adopt the children, child-headed households, then they look after. When those children get a BNG, an RDP and support, they go and kick them out of those houses and then again, sell. And that's where we are appealing to communities. One, it's illegal to sell our RDPs. Second, and including the land. So it's not supposed to be sold. If you are tired of it, the first right, we have a first right of refusal as government. So you must sell it to us first if you've passed the years that is required for you to be able to sell.
Okay, talking about selling, the challenge with, foreign nationals and people saying that people are selling houses to foreign nationals. Is there something in the system that's been done to keep that going forward?
We don't give houses to foreign nationals because you need to be a South African citizen. And these are sold by South Africans themselves. So you give them an RDP, they go and sell. And that's why I've been making an appeal for people to remember that we have limited fiscal environment. So we have limited budget where the demand is high. When we give you an RDP, you need it because we have made analysis that you need it. But to sell it to somebody else, instead of thinking that there is another South African who needs it, because we don't give to this, and that's the appeal we are making. Our system, we make sure that you can have. Today, I was referred to an area within Ivory Park where indeed somebody would be in a house. When you go and verify, they do not have the right papers. They are not South African, but the house is registered with a South African. So if I look into the system, I'll find a South African allocated to that house. But only when I go and ask the person who's in the house, they will be able to give me, I will be able to find out that it's not a South African. But many times what they do, they leave the documents, their IDs, if they know you are going to do a verification, they leave the owner of the ID, and somebody says, no, I'm visiting today. The owner has gone to town. Oh. So you have no way of understanding that here stays a person who's not supposed to. So it's one of those. That's why we appeal to people to be able to help us, report to them, so that we can get our law enforcement agencies to assist us.
So provinces have been directed to urgently make an audit of the blocked and unfinished projects, which you touched on a little bit earlier on. What is the turnaround for this process, and what are we hoping to achieve with this intervention?
Look, let me explain, because it's one of the things I know ANC is taking a lot of flack on. When people register, for example, you'd have heard somebody saying, I registered for my RDP in 1993, 96, others 2000, and I'm seeing people getting RDPs and I'm still waiting. And then others will say to us, I'm seeing younger people getting RDPs, I'm an old person, I'm still waiting. I've been checking. What has happened over time is that when a person registers to be a beneficiary and they are on the system, immediately the system will allocate them to a project. So when a project is not finished, so you'd be Penny, you register to get an RDP, and then from the system, because let's say you stay here in Johannesburg, we allocate you in Cosmo City. Then in Cosmo City, the project doesn't finish for 10 years. In the system, because you are allocated, it will regard you as a benefited person, because your house, your stand number is in Cosmo City. So that's where the problem is with the unfinished projects. So majority of the people who are sitting to say, I'm waiting for my RDP, that's where the problem is. So we're sitting across the country with quite a number of these projects, one way or the other, not finished. In other instances, it's contractors who were given money, did not finish their job and left site. So it will be linked to corruption. In others, it will be limited resources where we run out of money for one way or the other, and then the project is not finished. So the process now, we've requested provinces to do an audit of all these projects so that we can resuscitate. One is to open the system so that those who are allocated to those projects, we will be able to see them in the system and open the system so that they can be benefiting somewhere else. Second is to be able to complete those projects, because if we have not spent money on them and the allocation can be done, we would want, starting from the next financial year, to reprioritize those projects and start and finish them. The reason why we would want to finish some of this, because in rural areas, for example, if you go to Limpopo, we build in the yards. So you can't reallocate this person to another project. You have to come to that yard and build in that yard. Similarly in Free State, similarly in Northern Cape, that's what you'd find. So that's why it's important for us to go and do this audit and finalize it and be able to start within the next financial year in reprioritizing those. This includes the issues around asbestos. I know a lot of ANC voters who are sitting in asbestos roofs say to us, you have committed as ANC that you are going to deal with this. We are prioritizing that under our rectification program. Okay. In Limpopo, we've agreed 1,500 I have started to be removed, and we will be done. In Mpumalanga as well, we have started. We will be coming in Gauteng and in Free State.
So lastly, let's talk about the subsidy programs, in regards to helping people become homeowners.
Yes, we've got a program. This is the one earlier on I spoke about, the missing middle. We have people who do not qualify for RDPs, but also and less to qualify for bonds. So these are people who are sitting in the middle. What we do as government, those then they apply in a program which is called Help Me Buy a House. Either they can also, they buy a house, we provide subsidies, so we have low-cost bonded houses. We partner under what we call our National Housing Finance Corporation. They can apply under that, and then they are given, we subsidize that to bring the rate of payment and the bond lower, and people can be able to get that in terms of those who are not qualifying for RDP but not qualifying for normal bonds in banks. So that's one of the programs that we have. It's more growing. There were glitches on it in terms of application process. Now we have improved on the system, and they will be able to apply like you do with the normal banks. And we are currently looking in terms of partnering with the banks to be able to close the gap as well, to increase the number of affording. The other one within that, it's for rentals. There are people who will be in urban areas who do not want to buy a house because they stay at home. They'll be coming from Limpopo, they can go home every time. So what they want is where they can rent a decent place in an urban area closer to their work. We also provide low-cost rental housing as government. So you'd find that people can be able to rent for less than 900, 600, and they're able to live in decent houses. Some of them, it's the one that I opened at Lerato Park recently in Northern Cape, where we handed over for people to go and rent lesser, and they're able to live in a very decent place, safe for children to play, with play area. We put those, and there's braai area within those flats. It's flat types, braai area for younger generations, because we're looking at those categories of people. So what has advanced over time in human settlement and housing policy is to be able to acknowledge that you can't have one-size-fits-all product. You've got to be able to respond to different categories of citizens in able to be satisfying them as human settlement.
Okay, so, they might find themselves with RDPs in the city and then an RDP as well in the village, and which is a challenge for this coming Monday, because we have to go to the polls, and some of them might be leaving the cities to go to the villages. What do you have to say to them? Because come Monday, you need them to vote.
Look, the issue, for example, I want to speak about mainly, I think Gauteng will be affected a lot, and I want to appeal to Gautengers. Many of us who are in Gauteng know that we've had a terrible 5 years that we can't hide. Since 2016, when the coalition of DA took over, they stopped quite a number of things. Programs such as Josie at Work in Johannesburg, Tsepo 2000 in Tshwane, all those programs were stopped, and this is what kept people working, younger people employed, engaged. They stopped your Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi that was helping young people do their homeworks, for example, in Tshwane. Free basic services in Gauteng, in Johannesburg, were stopped. And that's why we are appealing to South Africans, especially Johannesburg people, Tshwane people, Gauteng people, to say for us to retain the municipalities and for us to achieve what we are saying in the manifesto so that they can hold us accountable. We can't lead with coalition. They've got to stay in Gauteng, vote. If they go home, let them go Friday, but Sunday they must come back and Monday they must vote. That's what my appeal to them. We've got to get back Johannesburg, Tshwane and Ekurhuleni, because in the coalition we are not able to achieve a lot. We have big plans, for example, in human settlements that we have to do within these urban cities. We can't do them in coalitions. They just hold us back. Okay. They don't share the same vision with us, and therefore it's important for South Africans to go out and vote. Those who are in the rural areas, who are South Africans, remember, for us to be able to fulfill what we are planning as human settlements, we need those municipalities to be functional, but to be ANC municipalities. Okay. So for me to come and visit them, they must have these ANC municipalities as well.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Ms. Minister. Have a great evening further. Well, there you have it. Let's do this again. Thank you for joining me right here on ANC News. I'm Penny Libiane. Until next time, good night.
South Africans want water, electricity, sanitation, and refuse removal. Our people want protection against crime and gangsters. People want local government to deliver services that they need and support the local businesses that provide jobs and livelihoods. This is what South Africans want. We are the African National Congress, and we've been serving the people of this country for the past 27 years. Vote ANC, Amandla! Amandla!